Welcome back, my friends. Thanks again for joining us for another episode as we continue studying through the book of Genesis together. If you're following along with us, we are in Genesis chapter 48 as we come to the last couple chapters of this book. And I hope it's been a help as we've learned a lot about the character of God, a lot about some of the foundational truths of Scripture, and a lot of what, Genesis, the beginning, a lot of what the rest of the Bible's built off of, our understanding of creation, and really seeing Israel in the history. And just, you get to learn about Israel, you get to learn about God's relationship with them, you get to learn about God's character, and we're going to see a little bit of this as we come to the end of this. Now, today for time, we really could go over all of chapter 48. It's all kind of flowing into the same context, the same story. For time, I'm not going to do that, so I encourage you to go read the first 7 verses, and really what you have is Joseph has been told that his father is about to die, and so he comes and meets with him. And Jacob tells him that even though you have 2 sons that were born in Egypt, they will still be and see the inheritance of being part of the children of Israel, part of Jacob's children. And so he brings that up, and he gives a little bit of history there, so read that. And it was not necessarily the case. I mean, Joseph's wife's Egyptian. And really what he's saying is it's not where you live, it's not the color of your skin, it's your bloodline. There are the sons of Joseph, and Ephraim, Manasseh, you'll know those. They become names later as we much more recognize in the tribes as you get into the later parts of Israel as a nation, as it grew here. It also is a reminder that God has promised to grow Israel and promised to take them back to the promised land. These are things that Jacob tells Joseph. But then what happens is Joseph, hearing this, brings his 2 boys back to receive a blessing. And there's some interesting things that shouldn't be shocking, as we'll talk about in a minute, but are taking place in this situation. So it says in verse 8, when Israel saw Joseph's son, he said, "Who are these?" Joseph said to his father, "These are my sons, whom God has given me here." And he said, "Bring them to me, please, that I may bless them." Now the eyes of Israel were dim with age, so that he could not see. So Joseph brought them near, and he kissed them and embraced him. And Israel said to Joseph, "I never expected to see your face, and behold, God has let me see your offspring also." So he didn't recognize them right away, more than likely due to the fact that he was going blind due to his old age. A very similar scenario to where Jacob was many, many years earlier when he was stealing the blessing from Esau, doing this to his father, Isaac. So another scene, similar in scene unfolding here. So Joseph brings his 2 sons closer together, and he begins to bring a blessing. Talks about the blessing. I thought I'd never see my son alive again, and I've got to see so many great blessings. And so verse 12, he goes into some of the details, what we're talking about. It says, "And Joseph removed them from his knees and bowed himself with his face to the earth. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand towards Israel's left, and Manasseh in his left hand towards Israel's right, and brought them near him." Now that was done on purpose, because the one was older, the right hand was a hand of blessing, and this is what Joseph was expecting, that the older one received the blessing, because that's the standard. The oldest one is the one that would receive the family in the home, and we'll talk in a minute ago about why that shouldn't have been a surprise to Joseph. And in verse 14, "And Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on the head of Ephraim, who was the younger, and his left hand on the head of Manasseh, crossing his hands, for Manasseh was the firstborn. And he blessed Joseph and said, 'The God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life long to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the boys, and in them let my name be carried on, and the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac. And let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth.' When Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on the head of Ephraim, it displeased him. And he took his father's hand to move it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. And Joseph said to his father, 'Not this way, my father, since this one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head.' But his father refused and said, 'I know, my son, I know. He also shall become a people. He also shall be great. Nevertheless, his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his offering shall become a multitude of nations.' So he blessed them that day." We'll go into the blessing in a moment. But why is it? You find it intriguing. So the blessing comes out. It's usually the older son receives the blessing. The younger one kind of serves the older son. And so Joseph had placed them right where they needed to be because Jacob had become blind or had a hard time seeing. And so when Jacob basically crosses his hands, aware of what's going on, to give the blessing, and really the right hand of blessing or the greater blessing on the younger son, Joseph, this is not tradition, it's not the way it should be. And it's intriguing that Joseph would have a struggle with this. Let me say why it's intriguing. Frankly, throughout the history of his family, it didn't go that way. If you want to go back to Isaac, in all reality, while Isaac was the promised child to Abraham, he was not the oldest. Ishmael was Abraham's older child. But Isaac was the promised child. So Abraham ultimately blessed Isaac, which was going against the culture. Then Esau comes in and Jacob comes in and steals Esau's birthright and blessing, and the second one receives the blessing, which from the beginning it was the idea that ultimately Esau would serve Jacob. So now we come to this point, and Joseph is shocked. And now Joseph himself was the favorite. Joseph himself was the one that had received the blessing, the coat of many colors, all those things when he's younger. His older brothers hated him as he was the youngest at the time. And so when you look at this, for him to come in to an extent demand that tradition be followed did not make a whole lot of sense, in the fact that none of that had really been followed up to this point. And Jacob said, while your younger son will be blessed, it will not be as much, while your older son will be blessed, not as much as your younger. And you find this continual counterculture approach that while it should have been done a certain way, it wasn't. And you continue to see this counterculture approach that is taking place in this home. Again, Joseph shouldn't have been surprised by this, but he was. And yet, this was what he blessed. Now, here's the blessing in end of verse 20. It says, by you, Israel pronounces a blessing, saying, God make you as Ephraim and as Manasseh. Thus he put Ephraim before Manasseh. Then Israel said to Joseph, behold, I am about to die, but God will be with you and will bring you again to the land of your fathers. Moreover, I will give to you rather than to your brothers one mountain slope that I took from the hand of Amorites with my sword and with my bow. Again, another blessing that came to Joseph that didn't go to the older brothers. And so this is really, it just came down to, as God led, as they were directing, they were stating the blessing, which they knew would come later. And all of this becomes a fulfillment of the Abrahamic covenant. All of this is part of God's plan. And as you begin to read into, again, it's established history to establish this, but as you read later throughout Scripture, even in the history of Israel, you're going to find that this is a major aspect of who got the blessing, who was the greater blessed of the two. Even though both of them will be blessed, all of them really as the head of the 12 tribes of Israel, expanding really to 13 because the two brothers. But when you look at this, though, you look and see that while it didn't make sense culturally, Joseph didn't make sense, Jacob was still doing this. You see this final tradition that was taking place, that was part of the Jewish culture. It was done differently than normal. And really, what you get, like we talked about last time, is a lot of history as you come to the end of this. And sometimes we look at history and it doesn't always make sense, especially if you're not comparing it to how it fills in with the rest of it. We didn't take the time to do all of that in these last couple of episodes. But I challenge you, don't ignore the parts of the Old Testament that are just history. And there's a lot of it. There's a whole section that we call the Old Testament historical books. They're important for a lot of different reasons, but it's important for us to gain a hold of this and know that when God put it here, it was on purpose, that we would be reminded that all of this is on purpose, there's no mistakes, and that we can hold to those truths even just by looking at history, that God has proven himself in all of that. Well, I appreciate sticking with us as we've just got a couple more chapters. We'll go through this and kind of finalize this whole thing up. Glad you've been with us during this time. Hope it's a help and encouragement. And as we dig into the last couple chapters and just see what God is teaching us, hope you stick with us. And then we're going to jump into a brand new book and start over and continue to learn more about God, his word, and what it means for us, and what it means for us in this day and age. Again, thanks for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you again next time.